Good evening, and thank you for taking part in tonight's broadcast. It's been a while since we've had one of these, and a lot of things have happened since then. There isn't enough time to talk about everything, but what I can tell you is that we have been in school for 113 days, 5 days a week with all our kids. It hasn't been perfect. We've had our share of quarantines. We've had our share of positives. To date, we've had 39 positive cases, 24 students, 5 teachers, and 10 staff. But we have had no document spread in our school. Tonight, I'm here to answer questions. Quite a few people have sent questions in ahead of time, and feel free to ask any questions. You can type them in the chat box as we go. I'm going to start with a few thank yous. First to Tony, Adam, and Luke in our tech department. Keeping our technology up and running was paramount, and as people got quarantined, we were delivering devices to them the next day. To Mrs. O and Mrs. Ratliff, their leadership has been outstanding through this whole process. To all of our teachers, you guys are the best. Balancing the kids in the classroom and our remote learners at home is not an easy task. Our office staff for answering phones, fielding COVID questions while still trying to do their jobs. To our bus drivers, who not only have to keep our students safe on the bus, but they also became temperature checkers, and they also had to make sure that we were distancing on the buses. Our custodial staff, who had to sanitize our building and clean our building like they never had before. And it's because of that we were able to keep everybody here and people didn't get sick. They did an outstanding job. And I could go on and on about all the people in our building and everybody that did everything to make this possible. This was absolutely a team effort. And the most important part of that team was our families. Thank you for your sacrifices in allowing us to do what we do. Thank you for taking my calls, mostly on the weekends, to give you the bad news. I felt like the Grim Reaper sometimes, but you always were uplifting when I spoke with you. Thank you for understanding each time that the rules changed and going with the flow. But mostly, thank you for trusting us with your children. They are your most prized possession, and you trusted us to keep them safe. We will be forever grateful for the trust and support that you gave us. So we're going to start. We had some questions that were already called in, so I'm going to answer those first, and then we'll get to everybody's questions as we go. So question number 1, will we continue to have 3 classes per grade next year? We haven't made a final decision on that yet. What we're hoping to be able to do is at least to keep K2 in groups of 3 and possibly higher if we can, but our goal at this point is to have at least K2 in 3 classes. Second question, will there be separate RTI classes next year, or will they continue to be done in the classroom? Well, some RTI classes this year were separate, and depending on how many groups of 3 we have will determine how often we can separate the RTI students next year. What will we do with our unused snow days? Yeah, isn't it crazy this year? So we've used 2 snow days, but they weren't used for snow days. If you remember, we had one day that there was a heating problem, and the second time we got a COVID call late into the evening, and it was really impossible to trace and get back to school. So we haven't picked any dates to give those 5 days back yet. One possibly could be the 12th of April, and as always, we'll probably use some at the end of the year. Will there be Regents exams and 3A tests this spring? So the Education Department has applied for a waiver similar to last year. Initially, that was not going to be granted. What they were going to do rather is just eliminate some of the tests and only have ELA and math. But just yesterday, we received a survey asking us to identify the assessments that we're using. That leads us to believe that maybe the waiver still has a chance, so stay tuned for that. What will graduation look like this year? Well, we know one thing, it's going to be on June 27th. Of course, we hope it can be traditional in our air-conditioned gym. Unfortunately, public health will make that choice for us. But we do have a backup plan, or actually 2 this year. We can do what we did last year and have it on the front lawn, or possibly use our stadium field to have it. So again, hopefully in the gym, but we do have 2 other places for it. What about prom? Well, we are going to have a prom. It is scheduled for May 22nd. Presently, the guidance from public health is for non-residential social gatherings to be 100 people indoors. So we have to do the math to make sure we can, if we can limit that, that'll determine where it's going to be and if we can. And those numbers could change too by the time June comes along. Will there be a senior trip this year? Yes, there will. We will be going to the Evangola State Park, and we're going to be staying in yurts. And I had no idea what a yurt was, but from what I've been told, it's a big tent. And they're going to be visiting Darien Lake. They're going to be visiting Niagara Falls. They're going to go to a Buffalo Bison's baseball game. It's not Florida, but it sure beats what we had last year. And it's tentatively set for June 17th through June 22nd. Will there be spring banquets this year? Answer to that also is yes. We are planning to have an academic and an athletic banquet. And similar to graduation, we hope to be able to have those in the gym. But again, a backup plan for those, different than last year where we had videos. We'll actually probably have the ceremony in the gym. We just may not be able to have anybody there. We may have to stream that on our YouTube channel too, depending on the numbers. Will there be spring sports? Yes, there will. We will be having varsity baseball and softball, and that practice begins on April 19th. We haven't made a decision yet on what we're going to do with modified spring sports. When do winter sports end? The last date for winter sports will be March 27th. We were able to play quite a few games this winter. Our boys and girls varsity basketball teams, our wrestlers, and our cheerleaders had a chance to have a season, and it actually is still going on right now. We had a chance to play quite a few games, and it's been a really great experience for the kids. Next question. I heard we might finish our soccer and tennis seasons from the fall. Is that true? So as you remember, we did start our fall soccer seasons and tennis season and ended up having to shut those down after 4 games because there was a COVID breakout in another school. And at that point, the contact tracing was a little different. Anytime there was a positive case, pretty much everybody got sent home. Things have changed a little bit, so we're hoping, and so far with our winter season, we haven't had to quarantine anyone. So, I'm sorry, to get back to that question, are we going to extend the season? Yes, boys and girls soccer and tennis will restart their seasons on March 22nd and play through April 17th, just prior to our spring sports season start. And there will be a 1-week overlap from the end of the winter season to the beginning of the spring season, and athletes will be able to participate in both sports. So if you're playing a winter sport right now and your last game is after the start of spring season, you can still sign up and still be able to practice during that week. Just an update on some of the new travel restrictions. Prior to vaccinations, if you traveled outside of New York State to any other state that didn't border New York, you had to quarantine for 10 days when you got back. There was a possibility for you to test out of that. If you got a test 3 days prior to leaving the state you were at and another test 4 days after you got back, you didn't have to keep the entire 10-day vaccination. Now with the vaccination, if you have had your second shot and it's been 14 days since that second shot, you can travel without quarantine. We're still encouraging people not to travel because it's very safe where we are right here and we want to keep it that way, but I thought it was important that everybody at least got the new information. So that is the end of the questions that were sent in early, so I'm going to ask Tony if we've gotten any, and I will do my best to answer them.
We do have questions, both written in on the YouTube live chat, and then some came in late as well. So let's start with the live feed. We have a question that asks, what will be the process following spring break if kids travel outside the state? Will this process coincide with CDC recommendations? So
as I mentioned, if you have been vaccinated, and presently children aren't being vaccinated, so they either can test in a time frame 3 days before they leave the state they're in, and then when they come back, they have to quarantine for 3 days, and they have to test on day 4. If they have 2 negative tests, they can come back at that point, or choose to quarantine for 10 days without testing.
Very good. Where are kids going to practice if there's snow outside still?
Well, as always, we've always started spring sports in the gym because in Copenhagen the snow doesn't go away. Generally, spring sports start the second week of March. So we will use the gyms. There will be some overlap with that as well. Athletes can use up to 3 practices. So if you're playing a winter sport, you can use 3 of your basketball, wrestling, or cheerleading practices to count towards your spring sport, but those will take place in the gyms.
Thank you. Can a kid use practices from their winter sport towards their fall sport?
Yep, I jumped the gun. Absolutely. Yeah, I just explained that. You can use 3. That's okay. You can use 3.
Do my kids have to pick between a sport if they overlap?
They do not. Again, you can sign up for spring sports knowing that your winter sport is going to extend past the start of spring, and you be able to compete in both. Mr. Spalding, who's our athletic director, has started to make that schedule already, and he's doing a great job of putting the 2 together. So boys basketball will practice first, then boys soccer. So kids aren't going to have to be coming and going. And he's also going to shorten those practices so somebody's not here for 4 hours practicing. Try to get both of those practices in about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Here's a good one. Can my kids sign up for fall 2 sports if they didn't play in fall 1?
Yes, that is a great question. Yeah, you don't have to have played in fall 1 to be able to play in fall 2.
Okay. Keeping with sports, when will games begin, and how many will be scheduled?
So the schedules are out. The games begin. You have to have 6 practices before you can play. For some sports, some need 10. So the schedules have been created around those parameters, and those schedules will be public shortly.
Very good. What about masks outside during sports?
Yep, still masking. That was a decision that we made in Lewis County. We were the only ones to play this fall, and we determined that we were all going to wear masks, and we agreed to that. And we're following that same protocol going into winter season. Everybody's masked. Fall 2 will be masked, and so will spring. Again, provided things don't change. If public health changes the rules, we will certainly abide by what public health says to do.
Mr. Connell, will there be any games during spring break?
We have decided to play during spring break, obviously, if athletes are away, and we've always played during spring break, and sometimes we have to play without a few players. We certainly aren't holding anybody or throwing anybody off a team or whatever if they go away on spring break and don't come to practice. Certainly encourage them to. As I mentioned, we hope nobody travels for spring break. We know that's not reality. People have been cooped up for a long time now, but we're hoping they don't because, again, we're very safe up here. But we're going to schedule games during spring break, as many as we can. Hopefully the snow will be gone by then.
Very good. What about metal cleats on the turf for baseball and softball? Are those allowed?
They are allowed. We're discouraging people, and I know they make cleats now that you can actually interchange the metal part with the molded part of a cleat. We're encouraging our kids to look for those when they go to buy cleats. But yeah, you can wear metal cleats on a turf field. It just it beats the field up a little more than a molded sole cleat does.
Okay. What about spectators at outdoor sporting events? Can we have more since it's outdoors?
So again, we're going to follow the guidelines of public health, and they're still saying 2 spectators per athlete. If that changes, we will change with the rules. There's also 50% capacity, which really isn't a problem with outdoor sports because there's so much room. But we'll follow whatever CDC and public health recommend for us.
Okay. One more sports question, and then we'll switch back to vacation questions. Will there be playoffs and sectionals for spring sports?
So the state tournament is canceled. They have not canceled playoffs or sectionals yet. So we're just going to have to wait and see. Mixed feelings on that. Obviously, if they have sectionals and playoffs, we're going to have to stop our season sooner. It's a balance between, do you want to play a lot of games or do you want to have a chance to win, potentially a league or playoff champion or sectional championship. So, you have to end those early because it will be an open tournament and a lot of teams involved, and it takes time to work down to the finals. So we'll see what happens with Section 3. They'll make that decision.
Okay. Here's a question about vaccines. If vaccines are made available to our students, let's say in the fall, are they going to be mandatory?
No. Not unless we're made to make them mandatory. I know with some of the shots when I was a child, everybody had to have them or you couldn't come to school. Right now, the vaccine is not mandated. We have quite a few of our staff have been vaccinated, not all, but they will not have to be unless we're told they have to be.
Very good. Okay, so here's a question about back to sports. So fall season 2, will we only be playing Lewis County schools or will we be branching out?
Great question. We are actually going to cross the county now. We will be playing schools in Jefferson County. And some of the schools in Jefferson County are choosing not to play schools in Lewis County. So the schedule was made to accommodate that.
We have a question from somebody in our live chat asking, what about kids who aren't able to get the vaccine, due to age cutoffs? If it's not even available to them, are they still going to need to quarantine?
If not vaccinated at this point, yes. Again, I mentioned early on the flexibility everybody's been showing, and the things change daily. So if it changes, we'll change.
Okay. Well, that does it for us. We have a question about, is the band going to be playing during graduation? I know it's probably too far out to say.
Sure.
But other than that, I think we've answered them all. We also have a student who says, you're doing a great job leading the school this year, Mr. Connell, so that's high praise.
Well, tell whoever that is to stop down tomorrow, and I'll give him the paycheck I told him I was going to give him. Her. Wow. Thank you.
She's watching, so
you'll
see her tomorrow. That's it.
All right. Well, I just want to, again, thank everybody for everything you've done. It's been our families that have made this work, driving your kids to school and taking my calls and all those things. We certainly appreciate it. And again, we appreciate the trust that you have in us to keep your kids safe. And have a great night. Thank you.